Hello everyone, it is Joe here from Omnipoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. Today we're going to be looking at the top 8 deck lists from Liverpool, as well as discuss the breakdown of decks in that day 2, 42 players were able to progress, and you're looking at a really lovely pie chart from Complexity Card Gaming, the team that I am a part of. Jack is the person who's actually made this lovely breakdown for us, and we always do a little discussion about what happened on the event. For events that we attend, we'll give you our records and whatnot, but also some fun facts in there as well about the tournament itself to give you a good feeling about what was going on around the tables. And yeah, I'll try and do a little bit of my best here to discuss what I felt about the tournament and the day itself as well, my own little insights. Now, I wasn't actually able to do much table scouting because I played Rapid Mali and most of my games went long. So, from anecdotally, there was obviously a ton of Mew. There was obviously a ton of Arceus. These were by far like the most popular decks. There was certainly extra like fighting cards being thrown into Arceus decks in particular. There was an expectation that Gengar was going to be popular. I think it was overall like less popular than expected. But there was still like some of it, and most of it sort of converged into those sort of mid tables where they'd certainly get some wins, but they'd also take a couple L's along the way as well. So that was why we saw only one Gengar actually making day 2. And I think just the inconsistency of the deck in general is just quite telling. And also, as we move further away from Brisbane and saw the results of heavy Path decks, a lot of the Mews respected Path a lot more. We saw some 4 stadium-based builds. We saw some Pumpkaboo-based builds. Jack also was one of those players using Pumpkaboo just to get out of Path lock. And you still are able to race Gengar efficiently as long as you have your abilities online very often. And Gengar does suffer against other matchups, especially ones adding in like fighting packages and whatnot. So things to bear in mind there. But obviously Mew and Arceus in its variety sort of package of partners did very well, both getting 15 variants into that day 2. Rapid Strike Malamar, which I am among the 7 here, really overperformed, and this is like the breakout event really for Rapid Mali, getting second place obviously, but also having a big chunk of this day 2 pool, much more than some of the other decks that we've seen previously. So yeah, it seemed to be a fairly well-placed deck for this event and did very reasonably well. And I wouldn't have thought many people would have put Mali as like the 3rd or 4th best deck in the game, but it seems like it's positioning itself there, to be honest. And I do think it has at least a very, like, you have a straightforward game plan against Mew and Arceus. I was able to harvest some wins against those sorts of archetypes in particular. And Rapid Mali is actually like really good into Gengar as well, I think. So it's really only like sniping decks that you're super afraid of. Some Arceus decks can be a challenge because of Aqua Bullet quick shooting. Those are things that I'm very afraid of. And the overall winning deck, Robin's deck, actually turns out to have a really good matchup against Rapid Mali, as I witnessed in top 8. So yeah, that's a small concern for Mali going ahead. There's a debate about whether you want to add the bench protection Manaphy into the list or not. I would still edge on the no side of things, but just know that Mali is capable and has enough power to spike events, but it's going to be one of these decks that you have to choose the right moment to play an archetype like this. Just where on the curve are all these spread decks? How safe is Urshifu? We've seen that its game plan is sort of fragile into Mew, I want to say. Even the list that Robin built, or the Limitless guys built and Tord was involved in building as well. I would still say that Mew is probably an unfavored matchup, and the element of surprise would have contributed to some of the high placements of this deck. And bear in mind that obviously the Limitless crew are some of the best European players in general, and some of them actually didn't perform very well with the deck. And I would say, like, if you would ask them, some of the players that didn't make day 2 would certainly expect to make day 2 in a majority of regionals that they attend, because they're just such phenomenal players. So although it got this big spike and won a tournament, there were a number of very good players missing day 2 with this archetype as well. So there are some inconsistencies here. There is some worry about that Mew matchup still. So it is still a bit of a dodge and weave style archetype. But yeah, Rounding out the pie chart, there was an interesting Hariyama one prize deck, Sanders control variant, which I have intimate knowledge of because I played against it twice. There was one Suicune Ludi. Only a few people were only ever going to pick this up, especially straight after Salt Lake. Possibly EUIC and Sao Paulo. People would have had more time to digest Finn's list, either tweak it to their own preferences or just get better at playing the list. So I would still expect Suicune Ludi to be taking up meta share of day twos and maybe a little bit more than this even as we go forward. But yeah, also has to be concerned by potentially some more spread coming into the format. People trying to feast on Mali, basically. Maybe Jolteon, which isn't in this pie chart, could see a small uptick. Jolteon really wasn't all that popular in day one in Liverpool. I didn't think it was super well placed going into the tournament, but now seeing these results, maybe there's somewhat of a reason to. But I think there's an even bigger risk now that there's Gale Thrust back in the format, which can just wreck Jolteon, right? So who knows, really? Maybe this will just be the premier spread deck going forward. But that's the overall feel of the meta share and how it's developed. Arceus came in many forms. The Inteleon package was super popular, but also the barrel packages I came up against a couple times, and I know that it's also in one of the top 8 lists. So we saw from Drew's Arceus Gengar build that the barrel engine is sometimes good enough. So that's also something to bear in mind. There was mustard builds, there was Clara bird box packages, certainly. Even weaving in Fighting Energy with Zapdos. Some Sandaconda made it as well, and Crobat VMAX also. So some spicy stuff going on here. But regardless, let's jump into the actual deck list and talk about it. So Robin's List, I've already sort of started my spiel on it, but there are a lot of lines to this list because there are a ton of individual one-offs. Most notably in the support accounts, I think you'll find that that's quite unorthodox. But the archetype really leans into the power of Keep Calling and Shady Dealings, and essentially says that you can cherry pick so much in the deck that you can really accumulate resources, especially in a format where Mew plays basically no hand disruption, Rapid Mally plays no hand disruption. A lot of the other like bird boxy decks are not playing a high count of Marnie, like maybe 1 or 2. So you can really cherry pick crazy combos, and that's what this deck sometimes aims to do. I know firsthand that its Rapid Mally matchup is pretty strong because it sets up Yoga Loop very nicely with quick shooting plays, as well as even attacking with like Assault Gate for 90 can be good into things like your own Octillery or into the Mallies. Again, that can put them in quick shooting range. And Urshifu is obviously a great sweeper in these matchups where there is no Manaphy. It's also just incredible against Arceus decks. Even with Dunsparce, this card can be incredible. You can go in with Rapid Flow early, deal with Dunsparce, and then just have the Gale Thrust pressure with one Cheryl and a potential pad as well. You can just mop up a ton of prizes with this card. You can move him in and out with the Tower of Waters as well, so you can see how they get the job done. You can just be a huge threat for Arceus players. The new matchup, I think, is shakier, and I probably need one of the Limitless guys to go into that in more detail, but from my understanding, they're trying to still set up Yoga Loop plays with Telescopic Sight Persimmon rapid flows onto things like Genesect, so that you can buy free turns with that Yoga Loop whilst you sort of catch up, either like Assault Gating a one-prizer or Malevolent Charging and Fiery Wrathing through like Muse on board and whatnot. So I think it's a bit of a situation where if you start things like Urshifu and Medicham, it forces you down a certain line. But in other instances, you can just cosplay as a one-prize deck for as long as possible and maybe weave in the Medicham if need be to like do a little bit of a catch-up. So yeah, it's a really flexible deck, has a ton of different lines to it. My nose has only just stopped bleeding after seeing this deck, honestly, and must be quite a difficult one to manage on all fronts, honestly, because there's so much going on here. But really the backbone is Shady Dealing is broken, Rapid Strike Search is broken, as it can cherry pick their energy, as well as, you know, the tower when need be as a switch out, get these big rapid flow plays off. So I'd expect it to still be a force in the metagame. I do think people will simplify this list probably. I almost said dumb down, but I feel like people will try and make it their own a little bit more. And make some changes, because there are some things where people like knee-jerk and say things don't really make sense for them. But I think the Limitless guys who built this list obviously had perfect reasoning for everything that they put in. Even though these counts look bizarre, there's no research, there's one boss, there's no Marnie, and it's preferring cards like Sonya. The knee jerk is to be very surprised by this, right, and be pretty shocked that it happened. But it certainly worked for Robin. The deck flowed really well when it was against me. So, yeah, that's the only experience I've had against it, and it was a really horrible experience to come up against, to be honest. I really wish I had dodged him in top 8, but alas, we could not. So congrats to Robin on the win. He was able to beat another Malamar from Brennan in finals. Brennan's list is 2 cards different from the list that I played. He plays double Shady Dealing and no quick shooting, and he plays boss instead of rope. Now, I think there's an interesting debate around both of those cards. I don't know how many Mews Brennan faced and what his record was against Mew. I was XO against Mew with my rope and was very happy with the include. Boss was obviously the standard list that we saw from Gabe Shumway anyway, and I believe this might just be a complete copy-paste, or it's playing the flip-flop of the Inteleon line as the only card difference. So Malamar really is getting close to an exact 60. That's obviously... Everyone going into this tournament had no real reason to play Manaphy, but potentially there is now. But yeah, the boss debate is interesting. It's still obviously helpful against Mew, but I find Rope is way more helpful, way more often. I could easily see Rope and boss being in the same 60. I'd probably look to cut something like Tower of Waters, which we both played, as it's not a high-performing card, and Rope is still super good against Mew, in my opinion. Playing no quick shooting is really bad for the mirror match, because essentially it then becomes who takes first prize. But if the opponent is playing quick shooting, they can always catch up as long as they commit their nets all in one go to bounce quick shooting enough times to knock out an Inkay or a Sobble or whatever else is floating around on the opponent's board. So I think with Malamar becoming more popular, you just have to take the hit and play one Shady Dealing, one quick shooting. Otherwise, you're losing too many mirrors, and I think it's more likely that you could face 1 or 2 in a tournament now, especially over 2 days. So I would definitely still stay on the split that I did. Shady Dealings Inteleon is one that's very scary to prize. I know that for certain, but it is what it is. I feel like it's also a bomb that you can draw that you're not happy to see if you are, if you don't have enough Drizzle developed. So I was super happy playing one Shady Dealings. It didn't punish me much throughout the weekend, and I think quick shooting only comes into play in a few situations, but with Mirror being one of those situations, I would look to make that flip-flop. But otherwise, yeah, very good list of Malamar, and I think it's very strong. Then we have Lennart playing a Mew. So Mew didn't completely flunk this tournament. It did pretty well with 2 of them in top 8, this one making all the way to top 4. This looks very similar to Natalie Miller's list from Brisbane, where it's got the quad phone. It's playing 3 Cram. It looks like that's the only cut for a 3rd copy of Rose Tower. I'm still kind of against playing this much of 1 copy of Stadium, even though Rose Tower can bail you in the early game, and obviously Lennart is playing the 4 Rotom Phone to, get you into that situation where, just 1 Ultra Ball, 1 Rotom Phone, 1 Rose Tower draw, can get you straight into the goods again, right? It can get you into VIP pass. So I understand that Rose Tower is obviously the best one you want to see, and the one you want to see earliest, but I would make the argument of playing Shopping Centre or Old Cemetery as one of your stadiums, because it is still really awkward in Mirror, and you're drawing less, especially if more people are playing higher Rose Tower counts. I know Tord also did a high Rose Tower count, and I'm not actually the biggest fan of it personally. So yeah. Then we have Alessandro Frender, who made top 4 with Arceus, the highest placing Arceus of the event. And it too is playing the Inteleon package, playing no quick shooting whatsoever, which is kind of interesting, and has a Crobat VMAX 1-1 line. So Crobat was already in the deck list of a lot of the American players at Salt Lake as just a 1 count so that you can actually get into play and get gaming. But the Crobat VMAX now becomes an attacking presence for the deck, which is really good into one prize matchups, specifically against Mali, actually, because it's hitting for weakness for that 70, and you can just keep throwing one prizes at the opponent and protect your bat, which is really good. It can also knock out Mews with its second attack with the base of 180 damage, which is obviously very good. And it basically just means that Crobat isn't this 180 hit point liability. You turn into a 300 hit point Pokemon, and sometimes that's just difficult to deal with for opponents. So very clever includes. It makes this dark package more fluid in the deck. So just the one Moltres, the one Clara, and this Bat package is very cool, actually. So one, I need to try out that little bit more. As soon as I saw Drew's list, I did try a Crobat base build from Drew's 60. Took out Gengar, tried Crobat. It's obviously far weaker of a card, because Gengar specifically can just be like Raihan attached onto, and you can insta-respond against a Mew. So this is a bit of a softer dark package than like Arceus Gengar, potentially. But you try and still skew that map when possible with that Galarian Birds combo. So yeah, and this deck still has the Path Judge combo, so it's still trying to fight Mew on that front at least. You can buy wins just straight from that combo alone. So it really is hybriding the like pure disruption of the like American Inteleon list, and trying to squeeze in the dark package as well to just really try and aggro out matchups when need be. And then you have Training Court against other path decks to still get your Starbirth online, which I think is a really good idea. I do like the 2-1 split of stadiums, especially when you're not all in on path. You have this other avenue to deal damage and win the matchup. Dunsparce, pretty smart decision actually going into the event. As it turned out, people were jamming fighting dudes into their decks. This could just have been in here for the likes of Zapdos, but it turns out there was Urshifus and stuff to worry about as well. So pretty interesting list overall, and I definitely feel like this is a good one to look at going forward. I do like the conscious choice to go to 3 double turbo, double capture energy, because captures are so good with Sobbles. Like, it's such a great keep calling play to capture to Sobble, get an Arceus down, and then get a full board of Sobbles. That's busted. Capture always good on Arceus as well if you're the player, because you're still choosing to go first at the deck, right? Because you're an Arceus deck. Just get capture onto Arceus, get a second one developed against the likes of Mew to guarantee your Starbirth is always really nice. So yeah, I think very smart decision. It's something that I like didn't pull the trigger on with a lot of my Arceus decks, but it was definitely in my conversation for a long time. So yeah, very intelligent 60 here, and I think could be the bread and butter going forward. Actually, it seems like it has a ton of answers. Now, time for the second nosebleed of the top 8. After looking at Robin's million one-offs, let's look at Sander's million one-offs. So, again, super interesting list. Sander always lives by the rules of having just enough consistency in his decks, and then shoves in options for the remaining spaces, essentially. So, Sander has said that a high Snorlax count, as well as a 3/3 Cincino line, with quad capture and the high level ball count is enough to get him drawing cards early on in the game, which I completely understand. And outside of that, he's got some draw in the form of Birdkeeper. Birdkeeper, obviously really reasonable just when you're trying to throw things in the active position early, like Snorlax, or move him out of the active position to move into one of your walls, like Altaria, for example. But this is actually a big combo piece for your Eldegoss, which is the main loop of the deck, actually. You are going to use Happy Match with Team Yell's Cheer to recover an amount of Pokemon and supporter cards, and then bounce back into the deck with Float Up, which is now possible via 1 energy attachment with Double Turbo. So that's the loop that Sander is going for here, to try and be infinite as possible. Early game, Birdkeeper never a bad thing to see more cards. You have a free retreater in Cutiefly, which is pretty nice, and also the Rabombi also has a free retreat cost. So a decent card. Also has this elements where you can move energies around. This could be really good, as your opponents will have a limited number of threats against Sander, specifically because of this Altaria Pot Helmet combo, allowing Altaria to 1v1 a ton of other one-prize Pokemon, because you have Chevron's Care and Double Turbo. So you slowly chip away with Speed Dive, and you try and recover this one Chevron's Care with Happy Match if need be, or you can just simply try and go aggressive and slowly Speed Dive through an opponent as well. So yeah, very cool stuff. The Picture Bukamuku is very intelligent as well. It means that when you are doing like the Happy Match float up plays, you can pitch that Pyukumuku to draw back into the double turbo. So you draw for turn the Eldegoss or the double turbo, and you pitch for the other. Essentially, it means that you re-access the cards each turn. Alternatively, if your Dust Noir is in play and you need to double attach to your Eldegoss, you can do Make Do Pitch, or just draw for turn Make Do to draw the 3 cards back if you really want to. Or you're just like slow attaching to the Eldegoss, or if you've drawn in the wrong order, if that makes sense, because you're going to have 2 energy and an Eldegoss, and you need the Eldegoss to be found earlier, you can use Picture Pyukumuku to give yourself a 66%er each time you do that jump to do it in the right order. So that's always something to bear in mind. You always have the Team Yell's Cheer if you need to like refill the deck that way as well, so you're not forced to loop Happy Match every turn. So things to bear in mind there. Altaria, super annoying, especially for Arceus decks, I believe it is the main answer there. The Dust Noir shutting down Single Strike, obviously very strong. Rapid Strike, obviously very strong. And is used against Rapid Strike Malamar as well to remove Spiral Energies. And I actually believe the matchup against Malamar is unfavored, as I found out throughout the weekend. Because Sander was oftentimes trying to wall with Wheezing, slowly develop Dust Noir, and basically it's a ticking clock for him. It's a bit of a time bomb to see how quickly he can get into this Wheezing. He doesn't have many good tutor outs because he just has 2 Ultra, 1 Incense to try and find this early. Needs to get his Zoroarks developed. Needs to also get like the second Zorua on the go just in case I ever blow up a Wheezing. He needs to re-establish that board, and then at the same time, like the third Zorua has to be committed towards finding this Dusclops Dust Noir. So these are 3 very difficult to search out cards in the deck, and he has limited draws to try and find those things. Like Piers is a great supporter to get things like the basics out early, and Piers can be used for Zoroark, but he's basically trying to hard draw into these cards. And if you're just wailing on him with Spiral Energied Mallies, normally you can just win by having enough energy remaining, as long as you don't prize things like your Ordinary Rod. So yeah, I think the Mally matchup is difficult, but the Dust Noir is the win condition, or a big part of it, as is the Wheezing. The Wheezing is just very strong against any sort of like Inteleon engine or whatnot. The Gorobus is in here to also shut off things like quick shooting, so that you can just slow grind your way through the game. The Yveltal, Hammers, Flanneries, Ribombee are all good against Mew, I'm certain. So yeah, those are obviously important. The Altaria may also be important against Mew because you force them to Max Miracle rather than just leap their energies back into the deck over and over again. So the Altaria can just be that card that forces a Mew to actually Max Miracle, which is why things like the Dust Noir and whatnot can pay off, and your energy removal route is strong. So that's a lot of discussion about Sander's deck. I am kind of eager to play this. I think it's pretty interesting and intelligent. I do like the Yell's Cheer Eldegoss combo. I also want to try out the Palisand combo with Roseanne's backup Curse Shovel as well, because I think that is another interesting route that gives this deck some active mill, and active mill is obviously a very terrifying thing rather than just making your opponent draw cards each turn and slowly whittle them away damage-wise, with the likes of Eldegoss doing 30 a turn, right? So, spicy deck. I'm sure we'll see new iterations from Sander going forward, but it seems to have answered enough things in the format. He ended up losing to the Arceus player, I believe. I didn't really know how that series went because I was also playing my own top 8 game, so I need to get more from him, who will also be posting, actually. Sander's going to do a really long post, I think it's tomorrow, on that CCG Facebook page, so make sure if you want to hear Sander's explanation instead of my own, you can hear it all there on the Facebook. So here's my list. As I said when talking about Brennan's, I play quick shooting, so I auto win mirror if people play Brennan's exact 60. But playing no boss was awkward in certain instances, but I thought rope was just stronger specifically against Mew, so that's why I made that judgment call. Like I said, the tower / Karina's focus are probably the easiest cuts if you want to make space for a boss in addition to the rope, or you can make the flip-flop. I'm not like super against that either. But yeah, we went 6 against Mew. We went through against Arceus. Oh no, I did lose a game to Arceus, but I got donked basically. I didn't get into the game both times. So that was... What were my only losses? So I lost to Sander, but I also beat him one game. And I know well, I believe the matchup is favored for me. He beat me with quad heads on Crushing Hammer, and my first 4 attachments in the game were all basic psychic instead of spiral, when your priority is always spiral energy, right? But you can't search out spiral because he's locking you with wheezing, so you can't just use the artillery. Anyway, that was a weird RNG L to Sander. I beat him day 1. I lost to Farasakum with that donk, and like winning 3 turns basically against me with Arceus Intel. And then my other loss was to Robin. That was it. And I think Robin's is like a genuinely bad matchup for me. So yeah, I really like the list. It was very smooth. I implore you to try it out, and I think it's a good deck going forwards with minimal changes required. Then we have Chrisso's list, so incorporating that big barrel engine instead of Inteleon, certainly interesting. Also doing the double turbo, double capture thing, so I think this is becoming more and more commonplace, and it's probably just the way to go, which I think is cool, incorporating those big charms to try and stay out of range. Isn't playing any path shenanigans, just trying to play courts to play towards the dark package. Has the Raihan Direflame Wings combo available to just try and blow up a Mew early after some aggression. Has also Pumpkin Pit, so is terrified of Path himself by the looks of things, and just wanted to have lots of ball search outs to get into his own Starbirth, which is pretty interesting. Has the Clara Malt package, which I think is just very strong, as we're finding out against Mew. Has E-Switch in here as well for Direflame Wings to get an energyless board even without Raihan, so some nice redundancy there. Overall, just seems like a consistent build of the deck. Interesting to see Bibarel over Inteleon, especially in this list where you play some specific supporters that you need to hit. But I guess the idea is that your tutoring all comes from Starbirth, so just time that correctly and you should be okay, whereas the Barrel helps you just churn through cards through the remaining of the game. You have a nice 5 1-prize Pokemon that you can have in the opening turn, so bear that in mind. Chrisso is not playing any Scoop Up Net, so he could get crumbed by Echoing Horning back this Moltres. So that could be something that you might want to consider going forward in the list, but otherwise seems solid. And could also try out the Crobat VMAX if you really want to. Then finally we have Rudolph's Mew, very different to the one that made top 4. This time it's playing the Tower of Darkness, which I think is a really good 4-off stadium actually. When I was saying I don't like 3 copies of Rose Tower, Tower of Darkness breaks the rules by being value by having the full 4 copies of the same stadium, because obviously you're dumping towers to get rid of towers in matchups where you don't require stadium to bounce path. Or in matchups where you just think you win the stadium war anyway, you have a couple of towers which can end up being extra fodder for you, which I think is really nice, and it means that you're playing a high stadium count while still respecting Mirror, because tower can draw more cards anyway, and you're still benefiting from your opponent bouncing the stadium because they'll be putting down things like Rose Tower for you, which is never a bad thing. So outside of that, just a very consistent list. Only playing 3 switch outs total with a 2-switch 1 rope, but it's with the double turbo, the triple double turbo build, so you can like pay retreat out Genesect if ever your opponent thinks to stall you. And in closed deck lists, most people would expect the 4 copies total, so I don't think it would even be in people's mind to make those changes. The sacrifice he made with the rope was to play a 4th copy of Boss, so that it being prized wasn't an issue in the likes of mirror matches. Also playing a 4-2 line of the VMAX. We saw some cheeky lines of Mew and Mew VMAX in a few other players' lists as well. I know Tor played a 3-2 line. So it looks to be something that people are trying to experiment with. Obviously, there's the fear factor of your opening hand, like making you Ultra Ball away of VMAX before you've had a deck search. There's the fear of prizing obviously being a minor issue, but you at least have Melodious Echo to get you through some opening prizes. So in theory, I guess it's not a huge issue for you. So yeah, it seems to be an acceptable cut for some people. But I think if you're not happy with that cut, you can go back to 3 Boss and just shove the VMAX straight back in to make yourself feel a little bit better. Or you can cut Boss to go to 2nd rope. But clearly, Rudolph made the choice that you always want to have Boss when you need it to pressurize whenever possible. So yeah, that is the top 8. Some really nice lists there. Lots to explore. Arceus is adapting. Mew seems to still be Mew and is doing better again now that we're playing higher stadium counts. Robin's List really is a spanner in the works for some archetypes, and it may be back to the drawing board with some of these decks. But it could be as simple as we start seeing tech cards go back into lists, the likes of Dunsparce, the likes of Manaphy, and whatnot. And there could even be more drastic changes going ahead, where I've started to hear murmurs of Capture Energy and Jolteon to deny Water Pokemon from having abilities. It's the mini Garbodor of the format, but based on the amount of Inteleon coming into all these lists that aren't Mew, maybe it's worth it. Who knows? I'd like to hear your thoughts all down below, and I'll see you in another video tomorrow. Cheers.